became sick. I knew it was wrong.
Had her car impounded.
Echoes call from hollow halls, a voice that creeps and softly crawls. Time stands still, the air is...
On October 8th, 2011, 19-year-old Karina Saunders was last seen getting into a red pickup truck outside a casino in Oklahoma. Just 5 days later, on October 13th, she was murdered and stuffed inside a duffel bag behind a grocery store in Bethany.
We've got a smell and a large black bag that has been hidden here.
These are 6 most disturbing videos that terrified the FBI. And if you think Karina's case is disturbing, wait until you see number 1. But warning, once you watch these videos, you cannot unwatch them. Let's start with number 6. Oklahoma has seen its share of violent crimes, but few cases have left such a chilling mark as the murder of Karina Saunders. She was just 19 years old, full of life, and trying to find her footing as an independent young woman. What happened to her in October of 2011 would shock the state, haunt her family, and spark rumors so disturbing that even investigators struggle to believe them. Karina grew up in Mustang, Oklahoma. Friends and family describe her as fun, outgoing, and full of love for the people around her. But like many teenagers, she hit rough patches. After graduating high school, she started experimenting with drugs, something her parents later admitted was a painful topic. Her mother, Margie, remembered trying everything, reasoning, crying, even yelling to keep her daughter safe. Eventually, Karina agreed to rehab. In the month before she disappeared, she was clean, spending more time with her family, and by all accounts doing better. She had even talked about faith and finding a new path forward. No one imagined that her life was about to be cut short in the most horrifying way possible. On October 8th, 2011, Karina was seen outside the Newcastle casino. Witnesses later told police she got into a red pickup truck. It was the last time anyone would see her alive. Her parents grew increasingly worried when her phone went silent, her social media accounts froze, and no one in her circle could reach her. Her father, Richard Saunders, would later recall calling everyone he could think of, desperate for information, hoping she would just show up. 5 days later, on October 13th, their worst fears were confirmed. Behind a grocery store in Bethany, just west of Oklahoma City, workers discovered a duffel bag tossed into a field.
We've got a smell and a large black bag that has been hidden here.
Inside was Karina's dismembered body. The crime scene was brutal, the kind that left even seasoned investigators shaken. One officer later described it as one of the most horrific cases they had ever worked. The community was horrified, but what came next made the case even darker. Whispers began spreading about a video, an actual recording of Karina's torture and death. Witnesses came forward, some to the Bethany Police Department, others to the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation. They claimed they had seen the video with their own eyes. Several even described specific details: Karina tied up, tortured, and killed, while others stood by. If the rumors were true, this was not just a murder. It was a planned act of cruelty, recorded for others to watch. The very idea of such a video stunned investigators. Could it really exist? 2 men were quickly arrested in connection with the crime. Luis Ruiz and Jimmy Massey were accused of kidnapping Karina, taking her to an abandoned house, and being involved in her murder. At first, it seemed like a breakthrough, but the case against them fell apart. There was no physical evidence, no video, and the witness testimony began to crumble. The charges were dropped, and both men walked free. Karina's family was left devastated all over again, feeling like justice was slipping further out of reach. By February of 2013, the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation took over the case. Even the FBI joined in because of the disturbing claims about the video. For years, rumors of the footage continued to circulate, each retelling adding new layers of fear. In October of 2016, 5 years after Karina's death, investigators announced a $10,000 reward for anyone who could provide the recording. That same year, OSBI Special Agent Jim Elley admitted publicly that he believed the video was real. He explained that too many people had described it in consistent detail for it to be dismissed as rumor. Despite these leads, the video never surfaced. For Karina's family, that was unbearable. Her sister, Sarah Saunders gave an emotional plea, asking, "How can you sit there and watch this beautiful girl be murdered and tortured in horrendous ways and not want justice?" The transcripts from local news interviews captured just how much pain her parents carried. Margie remembered putting up missing posters before Karina was found, refusing to believe her daughter had simply vanished. Richard Saunders recalled the call he dreaded, the one that confirmed her body had been discovered. The heartbreak was not just in losing their daughter, but in knowing the cruelty she endured in her final moments. The arrests and releases of suspects added another layer of torment. Jimmy Massey, one of the men initially accused, later claimed he wanted redemption and insisted he was not guilty of killing Karina. But for many, the damage was already done. The family had to watch as those accused walked free, while the investigation seemed to stall. As years passed, the mystery deepened. Theories swirled. Some believed Karina had been targeted because of people she knew. Others thought her case was tied to drug activity or human trafficking. And then there was always the shadow of the alleged video. The possibility that proof of her final hours was still hidden somewhere, held by people too afraid or too cruel to hand it over. Investigators have admitted that even without the footage, the details they do know are disturbing enough. Karina's remains were not just left in the open. They were dismembered, stuffed into a bag, and discarded like trash. Whoever did this wanted to send a message. Whether the video is real or not, the brutality of the crime is undeniable. Her case has become one of Oklahoma's most haunting unsolved murders. It is not just the violence of it, but the unanswered questions. Why would anyone want to harm her in such a way? Who was in that red truck? And if the video does exist, why has it never been found? Karina's family has never stopped pushing for answers. Her mother and father continue to speak publicly, hoping someone with information will finally come forward. For them, the wound has never closed. Each anniversary of her death brings the same pain, the same reminder that the people responsible are still out there. For the public, the case of Karina Saunders remains terrifying because of what it represents. It is not just about one young woman's murder. It is about the possibility that people could record such an atrocity, share it, and then hide it for years. It forces the question, how much evil is hidden in plain sight? More than a decade later, Karina's story still lingers. Her face, once on missing posters, is now remembered in vigils and memorials. Her family keeps her memory alive, hoping that one day, someone will have the courage to tell the truth. Until then, her murder remains a chilling reminder that even in small communities, horror can strike suddenly, leaving behind scars that never heal. Before we go any further, I just want to ask you for a small favor. If you're enjoying the video so far, please give it a like. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time. We recently hit 100,000 subscribers, and that's all thanks to you. Our 100K special surprise was revealed, and we had many positive responses from you. Our next goal is to hit 200K before the year ends. It feels impossible, but hey, it's free to dream, right? Also, there's a hidden word somewhere in this video for you. Let's see if you can find it. Now, back to the video. On February 13th, 2017, Liberty German and Abigail Williams, two best friends aged 14 and 13, went hiking on the Monon High Bridge Trail in Delphi, Indiana. A family member dropped them off in the early afternoon, planning to pick them up later, but the girls never returned. The next day, their bodies were found near a creek, not far from the bridge. What made the case especially disturbing was what investigators recovered from Liberty's phone. Just before the murders, she had secretly recorded a video. The clip, only 43 seconds long, showed a man walking on the bridge toward the girls. His voice was captured too, saying the chilling words, "Down the hill." Police later praised Liberty as a hero. Even in her final moments, she had the courage to hit record, leaving behind crucial evidence. The man in the video became known publicly as Bridge Guy. For years, the case remained unsolved. Authorities released grainy images and short audio clips, but no arrests came quickly. The FBI even suggested in a search warrant that the girls' bodies had been moved and staged, a detail that added to the horror and mystery. It took more than 5 years for a break. In October 2022, police arrested Richard Allen, a local man from Delphi. Prosecutors linked him to the crime through a bullet casing found between the girls' bodies. Ballistic experts testified that the marks on the round matched a pistol owned by Allen. In court, prosecutors also argued that Allen's image and voice in Liberty's recording were undeniable. During the trial in October 2024, jurors were shown the full video and heard enhanced audio. Prosecutors painted a chilling picture, saying the last thing the girls saw was Allen's face, and the last words they heard were his command to go down the hill. In November 2024, a jury convicted Allen on multiple counts of murder. He was sentenced to 130 years in prison. Still, many questions linger. Some believe Allen did not act alone. Others point to inconsistencies in the suspect's sketches that were released during the early stages of the investigation. Then, in March 2025, Allen's defense team shocked the public by launching a website that posted the full, unedited video from Liberty's phone. Seeing the man's slow walk and hearing his voice in real time reopened old wounds for the community and reminded everyone of the bravery of two young girls who never made it home. But the story did not end there. Richard Allen's conviction was hailed as justice by many, but not everyone agreed. His wife, Kathy Allen, has stood firmly by his side. Speaking in a new documentary titled Capturing Their Killer, The Girls on the High Bridge, she insisted her husband has been wrongly convicted.
I need people to know that my husband's not a monster. He's not the monster that people think he is.
The documentary revisited the 5-year hunt for the killer, focusing on the tantalizing image captured on Liberty's cell phone. It showed the man approaching the girls on the abandoned railroad trestle. It also replayed the now famous snippet of his voice. Police interrogation videos added another layer. In them, Allen repeatedly denied being the man on the bridge. He insisted it was not him, that nothing tied him to the murders, and that investigators would never convince him otherwise.
It's not me. You're not going to make me believe it's me. You're not going to find anything that ties me to those murders, so I'm not really that concerned.
It is true there was no DNA evidence or fingerprints found at the crime scene, but prosecutors argued there was a mountain of other forensic evidence pointing to Allen's guilt. The bullet casing was central. Experts said the extraction marks matched Allen's gun perfectly. Even more damaging were his confessions. According to investigators, Allen admitted to the murders more than 60 times. His defense argued those confessions were unreliable, claiming that 13 months of solitary confinement had broken his mind. Kathy Allen never wavered. She recalled the day her husband was convicted in November 2024. "My husband said to me, 'You know me, you know I am not capable of something like that.'" But not everyone shared her view. Libby's grandfather expressed certainty. To him, Richard Allen is guilty and always will be. The Delphi murders remain one of the most chilling cases in recent memory because of the haunting evidence left behind. A shaky video clip, a short command, a man's slow walk, a community forever changed. For some, the trial brought long-awaited closure. For others, it opened new questions. Did Allen act alone? Could someone else still be involved? And why, after all these years, does the video still leave so much room for interpretation? What cannot be questioned is Liberty's bravery. By pressing record in her final moments, she gave investigators a vital piece of evidence, one that ensured her and Abby's story would never be forgotten. To this day, the words "down the hill" echo across Delphi, a reminder of two young girls whose lives were cut short, and a case that continues to stir debate about justice, guilt, and truth. On May 14, 2008, shortly after midnight, a 19-year-old named Brandon Swanson crashed his Chevrolet Lumina into a ditch on a gravel road outside Canby, Minnesota. To this day, no trace of Brandon has ever been found. His story remains one of the most mysterious disappearances in modern American history. Some believe he was kidnapped, others that he fell into a river and drowned, and others still that something stranger happened, perhaps even abduction by forces unknown. Brandon's case has drawn nationwide attention, not only for its strangeness, but also for the chilling audio of his final phone call with his parents, a call that ended with two haunting words.
As long as he was talking, as long as we had contact, it was okay. We would be okay. But the minute that that call dropped, I just became sick. I knew it was wrong. I knew it was very, very bad. And just could hardly fathom, what was happening at that point.
Brandon was a typical all-American teenager, born and raised in Marshall, Minnesota. Friends and family described him as responsible, kind, and focused on his future. In 2007, he graduated from Marshall High School and then enrolled in Minnesota West Community and Technical College in Canby to study wind energy technology, an emerging field at the time. By May of 2008, he had completed his first year and was preparing for graduation. On the night of May 13, 2008, Brandon joined classmates for small celebrations. His first stop was a friend's house in Lynn, Minnesota. Witnesses confirmed he had been drinking, but no one believed he was impaired. Later that night, he drove to another gathering in Canby to say goodbye to a fellow student. There he reportedly had a single shot of whiskey before leaving sometime after midnight. Instead of taking the familiar Highway 68 directly home to Marshall, Brandon chose a network of rural back roads, possibly to avoid police. The decision would prove critical. These country roads were narrow, dark, and poorly maintained. Around 1:15 a.m., his car became stuck in a shallow ditch near the border of Lincoln and Leon counties. Brandon called friends first, but no one answered. Then at 1:54 a.m., he phoned his parents, Brian and Annette. He told them he was stuck in a ditch between Marshall and Lind and asked for help. For the next 47 minutes, Brandon stayed on the line, trying to guide his parents to him, but the directions he gave were inconsistent. At times he believed he was near Highway 23, when in reality he was near Highway 68. He told his parents he was flashing his headlights to help them see him, but Annette and Brian never spotted the lights. The surrounding countryside was pitch black. Had they been close, they would have seen the beams cutting through the darkness, yet nothing appeared. At 2:17 a.m., Brandon grew frustrated. He told his parents he could see the lights of a nearby town, which he believed was Lind, and said he would walk toward them. He asked them to meet him at the Linwood Tavern parking lot. The call briefly dropped, and then reconnected at 2:23 a.m. For the next 47 minutes, Brian stayed on the phone with his son as he walked. Brandon described gravel roads cutting through fields and climbing over 2 fences. He mentioned hearing water nearby. The conversation was calm, his father later recalled. Brandon did not sound panicked, just determined to reach the lights ahead. Then at 3:10 a.m., the calm broke. Brandon suddenly exclaimed, "Oh shit," and the line went silent. His father thought he heard his son's foot slip before the connection was cut off. Brian and Annette called repeatedly. The phone rang, but Brandon never picked up again. At 6:30 a.m., after hours of searching themselves, the Swansons called the Leon County Sheriff's Office. At first, police dismissed their concerns. They suggested Brandon had probably been drinking and simply stayed out all night, something common among young men. One officer even told Annette it was his right to be missing. But as hours passed without any sign of him, law enforcement began a formal search. By 12:30 p.m., deputies located Brandon's car in a ditch near Taunton, about 25 miles from Marshall. The car showed no damage and no sign of a struggle. Its placement suggested Brandon had simply misjudged a turn and driven into the shallow ditch. Search efforts intensified. Bloodhounds traced Brandon's scent from his car down gravel roads, across fields, and eventually toward the Yellow Medicine River. The dogs even entered the river and emerged on the other side, suggesting Brandon may have fallen in, but managed to climb out. The scent trail eventually ended near another gravel road. This aligned with what he had told his father on the phone. Despite extensive ground and aerial searches, no trace was found. Authorities scoured rivers, fields, and drainage ditches. Dive teams explored the Yellow Medicine River multiple times. Volunteers combed the countryside. Nothing. Brandon was legally blind in one eye, which may have impaired his depth perception, especially on a moonless night. The terrain was rugged, with hidden holes, barbed wire fences, and uneven ground. It is possible he stumbled, injured himself, or fell into water again after the call ended, but if so, his body has never been recovered. Theories abound. Some believe he drowned in the Yellow Medicine River, although repeated searches found no remains. Others suspect foul play, though there is no evidence of another person. A smaller group wonders if Brandon, disoriented, simply succumbed to the elements and his body was missed. His final words remain haunting. Was he startled by an animal? Did he fall into water? Or was he confronted by someone? In the years since, Brandon's case has taken on broader meaning. His parents became advocates for missing persons. In 2009, Minnesota passed Brandon's law, requiring police to take missing adult cases seriously and began investigations immediately. It was a direct response to the dismissive attitude authorities had shown on the morning he vanished. Despite renewed searches in subsequent years, including dives as recently as 2019, no trace of Brandon has ever been found. His phone records, bank accounts, and social security number show no activity since that night. For his parents, the pain remains sharp. Annette once said that, as long as Brandon was on the phone, she believed things would be okay. When the line went dead, she knew something was terribly wrong. The case continues to draw attention from investigators, journalists, and online communities. Some point to the grain elevator light visible from where his car was found. They believe Brandon mistook that light for the town of Lind, leading him further away into dangerous terrain. Others still whisper about stranger possibilities, that his final words suggest something sudden and unexpected. What is certain is that Brandon Swanson left his car on a quiet country road in the early hours of May 14, 2008, spoke calmly to his father for nearly an hour, and then vanished after uttering 2 final words. His disappearance remains one of the most perplexing mysteries in Minnesota history. Matrice Richardson was the kind of young woman who lit up every room she entered. At 24 years old, she had graduated with honors in psychology from Cal State Fullerton, and she was known for her infectious laugh and kind spirit. Friends described her as bubbly, intelligent, and deeply compassionate. She dreamed of opening her own practice, one that would support and uplift the LGBTQ community. She was also a former cheerleader and an active part of her Native American heritage, proud of her Holly-Wasaponi roots. Her future seemed bright, filled with purpose. But all of that was shattered one fateful night. It was September 17, 2009, when Matrice found herself at Jeffrey's, a high-end restaurant in Malibu. Witnesses later said her behavior was unusual and erratic. She ordered food, but when the $89 bill came, she could not pay. Staff members noticed she seemed confused, at times almost detached from reality, and eventually they called the sheriff's department. Deputies arrived and questioned her. One officer even remarked aloud that she seemed nuts, a blunt acknowledgement that she needed psychiatric evaluation. Instead of taking her to a hospital, however, deputies placed her under arrest and transported her to the Malibu Lost Hills Sheriff's Station. Her white Honda Civic was towed away. Inside were her phone, purse, and wallet.
Her cell phone, her money, put it in the trunk of her car, had her car impounded, and took her to Lost Hills Station.
By the time she was booked at the station, she had no way to call for help, no ID, and no money. When her mother, Letty Sutton, learned what had happened, she immediately phoned the station. She pleaded with deputies not to release her daughter in the middle of the night, alone and vulnerable. The watch commander told her not to worry. They typically released detainees at 6 in the morning, he said. Matrice was safe, and her mother could pick her up then. But that promise was broken. At exactly 12:28 a.m., Matrice was released from the Lost Hills station. No car, no belongings, no phone. She walked out into the darkness of the Malibu Hills, an area known for its isolation, with winding roads, vast canyons, and dangerous wildlife. Officials later insisted she appeared fine, calm, and coherent, and therefore had the right to leave. Just hours later, at 6:30 a.m., a man named Bill Smith, a retired KTLA news anchor, spotted her in his backyard in Monte Nido. When he asked if she was alright, Matrice told him she was just resting. That would be the last time anyone saw her alive. When her family realized she had not come home, panic set in. Letty Sutton and Michael Richardson, Matrice's father, began calling the station repeatedly. At one point, a deputy told them Matrice was still inside her cell sleeping. That was false. She had been released hours earlier.
This dude says, "Oh, I'm looking at her right now. She's in the cell, sleep." But she was released at 12:33 a.m. in the morning in the middle of the wilderness of Malibu.
Days turned into weeks. Search teams scoured Malibu Canyon. Volunteers joined. Helicopters flew overhead. Dogs combed the rugged terrain. In January 2010, more than 300 volunteers joined what became one of the largest searches in California history. The search covered 18 square miles of Malibu Canyon. Still, not a single trace of Matrice was found. In June, her family organized yet another search, desperate to bring her home. But again, they came up empty. Then, almost 11 months later, On August 9, 2010, two park rangers made a horrifying discovery. In a remote part of Malibu Canyon, deep in a dry creek bed near a private ranch known for filming pornography, they found human remains. It was Matrice. Her naked, partially mummified body lay scattered, with her clothes strewn nearby. But the nightmare only deepened. Instead of waiting for the coroner, deputies collected her remains themselves, placing them in a plastic bag and flying them out by helicopter. Experts and her family were outraged. It violated procedure and may have destroyed evidence that could explain how she died. The Los Angeles County Coroner's Office had explicitly instructed deputies not to disturb the scene until investigators could examine it. Yet, the order was ignored. Her parents were devastated. Michael Richardson described the moment as another betrayal. First, she had been released into the wilderness without protection. Then, when she was finally found, her remains were mishandled, forever damaging the chances of finding the truth. The official ruling from authorities was that her death was not a homicide. No foul play, they said. But how could they be sure when the scene was disturbed? Why were her clothes scattered, her bra found far from her body, her panties elsewhere? And why had locals reported hearing screams echoing through the canyon in the days after her disappearance? For her family, the explanations never added up. They filed lawsuits against Los Angeles County, arguing that deputies had failed in their duty of care. In 2011, they reached a settlement of $900,000, but the money did not bring closure. Lattice and Michael continued to demand answers. The case also exposed troubling practices within the sheriff's department. For 6 months, officials denied that there was any surveillance video of Matrice's release. Later, they admitted that footage did exist. The station captain who had denied its existence conveniently retired, only to return as a consultant overseeing the very case. Officers who had been involved were reassigned. To the family, it looked like a cover-up. Matrice's story became more than a personal tragedy. It became a symbol of systemic failure. Community leaders pointed out that her treatment reflected broader issues in law enforcement, neglecting mental health, failing to protect vulnerable individuals, and prioritizing procedure over humanity. Critics noted that officers had clear signs she was in distress. They could have taken her to a hospital, accepted her grandmother's offer to pay her bill, or kept her until morning as promised. Instead, they released her into danger. Her case also fueled debates about jail construction and oversight. At the time, Los Angeles County planned to spend $3.5 billion building 2 new jails, one of them in Lancaster, another isolated area. Activists argued that placing facilities in remote locations increased risks for detainees and reduced accountability. They pointed to Matrice's death as a warning sign, a case that showed what could happen when vulnerable people were left in secluded environments with little oversight. Michael Richardson was blunt. He said the system had failed his daughter. Everything about that night pointed to the need for medical evaluation, not incarceration. But deputies chose otherwise. He also criticized the secrecy that followed. Surveillance was hidden. Officers were reassigned. Evidence was disturbed. To him, it was proof that accountability was missing. Matrice was more than just a case. She was a daughter, a scholar, and a woman with dreams of healing others. Her family described her as loving, ambitious, and determined. She wanted to give back to her community, and had the potential to do so much more. That makes the unanswered questions surrounding her death even more painful. Why was she released without her belongings? Why was her family misled about her whereabouts? Why were her remains handled improperly? Why were screams reported but ignored? To this day, those questions remain unresolved. Officially, no foul play was involved, but for her parents and many others, the truth has never been uncovered. They continue to believe that Matrice's case represents not only a personal tragedy, but a systemic failure in how law enforcement treats vulnerable people. Her disappearance and death remain one of the most disturbing unsolved mysteries in California. More than a decade later, the image of Matrice walking out of the Lost Hills station at 12:28 a.m. into the darkness of Malibu still haunts investigators, family, and the community. Her story stands as a reminder of the consequences of negligence and the need for reform so that no other family has to endure the pain her loved ones still carry. The Dyatlov Pass tragedy is one of the strangest mysteries ever recorded. Even after more than 60 years, the questions around it remain unanswered, leaving behind only fragments of evidence, speculation, and unsettling photographs. It began with a group of young students from the Ural Polytechnical Institute. They were skilled hikers, serious about their craft, and prepared for the challenges ahead. Their leader, 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov, was respected and trusted, a man known for his discipline and experience in the mountains. For these students, this journey was not just a holiday, it was a chance to earn the highest hiking certification in the Soviet Union, something that required them to successfully complete one of the most difficult winter routes. There were 10 hikers in the beginning, but one of them, a 21-year-old named Yuri Yudin, was forced to turn back early because of severe joint pain. At the time it felt like bad luck. Later it became clear his health issues had saved his life. He would be the only member of the group to survive what history would call the Dyatlov Pass incident. The 9 remaining hikers continued on. They were determined, experienced, and confident. On the night of February 1st, 1959, they pitched their tent high on the slopes of Kolatsayak, a peak whose name translates from the local Mansi language to something ominous, Dead Mountain. Photographs later recovered from their cameras show them digging a platform into the snow, smiling, and preparing their camp. It was the last time they would ever be seen alive. Hours later, something happened that forced them to cut their way out of their own tent and flee into the darkness, leaving behind all their equipment, coats and boots. The tent was found weeks later, half collapsed and covered in snow. When rescuers looked inside, they saw the hikers' belongings neatly arranged. There had been no time to gather anything. The fabric of the tent was sliced open from the inside, as though the hikers had been desperate to escape. Footprints in the snow stretched away from the campsite. They were not chaotic or panicked. Instead, the group had walked in a single file line, barefoot or wearing only socks, into temperatures of -30 degrees. That decision alone has baffled experts ever since. 1,500 meters from the tent, under a cedar tree, the first 2 bodies were found. They were dressed only in underwear. Evidence of a small fire was nearby, suggesting the men had tried to keep warm. Both had burns on their skin, along with bruises and cuts. One of them had gray fluid around his mouth, a sign of severe chest trauma, though his official cause of death was listed as hypothermia. The other had burns on his hands and legs, and a piece of his own knuckle bitten off, as if he had been in unbearable pain. Not far from the cedar tree, 3 more bodies were found in a straight line leading back toward the tent. It looked as though they had tried to return, but collapsed from exhaustion and cold before they could make it. Among them was Igor Dyatlov himself, fists clenched, as though he had been fighting until his last breath. The final 4 were missing for 2 months. They were discovered only when the snow melted in May, buried deep in a ravine. Their condition shocked investigators. 3 had suffered massive internal injuries, like broken ribs and skull fractures, without any external wounds to match. One hiker, Lyudmila Dubanina, was missing her tongue and her eyes. Another had his eyes removed as well. Several of their clothes tested positive for high levels of radiation, something investigators could never fully explain. The Soviet investigator at the time, Lev Ivanov, eventually closed the case in May of 1959. His conclusion was vague, stating only that the hikers had been struck by a compelling natural force. The report satisfied no one. Over the years, theories multiplied. Some suggested murder at the hands of the KGB. Others blamed secret military experiments. More outlandish ideas pointed to Yetis or UFOs. But the central questions always remained the same. What drove 9 experienced hikers to abandon their only shelter in the middle of a freezing night? And what caused the horrific injuries that some of them suffered? For decades, the avalanche theory was dismissed. The area was not known for avalanches, and the injuries did not match typical avalanche victims who usually die of suffocation rather than broken bones. But in 2021, Swiss scientists Johann Gallmann and Alexander Puzrin published a study showing that a rare phenomenon called a slab avalanche could explain what happened. In their reconstruction, when the hikers cut into the slope to pitch their tent, they destabilized a weak layer of snow beneath the surface. Over the next few hours, strong winds added more snow until the weak layer collapsed, releasing a heavy slab that struck the tent. The pressure could have caused the crushing injuries seen on some of the bodies. Fearing another avalanche, the hikers cut their way out and headed for the tree line, where they tried to make fires and dig shelters, but the cold was too much. Still, not everyone is convinced. Another theory suggests katabatic winds, a violent weather phenomenon where freezing air rushes down a mountain slope with hurricane-like force. In such conditions, the tent might have been at risk of tearing apart. With no time to gather their frozen equipment, the hikers would have been forced to cut their way out. Later, while digging a snow shelter for protection, it could have collapsed, crushing those inside and leaving them with broken ribs and skull fractures. These scientific explanations answer some questions, but they do not solve everything. Radiation on the clothing remains unexplained, nor do they fully account for the missing eyes and tongue, though some argue those injuries came from natural decomposition in running water. And then there are the stranger theories. A blurry photo from one of the recovered cameras appears to show a tall, dark figure in the snow, fueling speculation about a Yeti. Local hunters reported seeing strange lights in the sky around the time of the tragedy, leading to rumors of UFOs. Some believe the hikers stumbled into a secret Soviet weapons test. Rocket launches were reported in nearby areas during that winter, and some of the injuries looked like the shockwave from an explosion. The truth may never be known. Each theory explains part of the puzzle, but leaves gaps. The avalanche fits the injuries but not the radiation. The wind explains the sudden evacuation but not the missing tongue. The military theory accounts for secrecy, but not the careful way the hikers' possessions were left untouched. What we do know is that 9 young people set out on a journey of skill and endurance, only to meet a terrifying fate on the slopes of Dead Mountain. Their story is preserved in the photographs they took, in the diaries they left behind, and in the chilling evidence of their final night. More than 60 years later, the Dyatlov Pass remains a mystery caught between science and speculation. Whether it was an avalanche, a windstorm, or something far stranger, the events of that night in February of 1959 still haunt investigators and captivate the imagination of people around the world. When people ask what the most horrific case ever recorded is, this story almost always comes up. Even seasoned investigators, journalists, and true crime experts describe it as one of the darkest crimes in human history. It is the story of Junko Furuta, a teenage girl whose life was destroyed in ways that are almost too painful to imagine. Junko was born in Mesato, in the Saitama prefecture of Japan. She lived with her parents, an older brother, and a younger brother. In school, she was known as smart, hardworking, and cheerful. She earned good grades, rarely missed classes, and had dreams of a bright future. She worked part-time at a plastic molding factory, after school to save up for a graduation trip, and after finishing high school, she already had a job lined up at an electronics store. She was the kind of teenager any parent would be proud of. Junko was also well-liked among classmates. She was attractive and drew attention easily, though she stayed away from trouble. She did not drink, she did not smoke, and she stayed far away from drugs. Ironically, this made her stand out even more. To the local troublemakers, the wannabe gang members who hung around pretending to be part of the Yakuza, she seemed uptight, even boring. Among them was a boy named Hiroshi Miyano, who developed a crush on Junko. When he approached her, hoping to take things further, she refused. For Hiroshi, that rejection was unbearable. He was feared around school, involved with shady Yakuza circles, and he was used to getting his way. The idea that Junko dared to reject him made him furious. He and his friends decided they would get revenge. On November 25, 1988, Junko was riding her bicycle home from her part-time job. That evening, a boy unrelated to her knocked her off her bike. Conveniently, Hiroshi appeared to chase the boy away and offered to escort her home. Junko accepted, unaware that this was all part of a trap. Instead of taking her home, Hiroshi lured her to an abandoned warehouse, revealed his gang ties, and raped her. He then took her to a hotel, called 3 of his friends, Joe Ogira, Yasushi Watanabe, and Nobuharu Minato, and together they continued the assault. The next morning, the boys learned Junko's home address. They threatened to kill her family if she ever tried to escape. Then, they took her to Minato's family home, where she would spend the next 44 days imprisoned. Even worse, Minato's parents and brother were aware of what was happening but chose to stay silent, fearing Hiroshi's gang connections and worried more about their reputation than the life of a 17-year-old girl. Junko was kept in a bedroom, forced to pretend to be Minato's girlfriend whenever adults were around. Very quickly, the pretense was dropped. The 4 boys made her their prisoner. They beat her daily, raped her multiple times a day, and often invited their friends over to take part. Within days, more than 30 people had assaulted her, and by the end of her captivity more than 100 were believed to have been involved or aware of what was happening. The torture escalated rapidly. She was forced to remain naked. She was beaten with golf clubs, bamboo sticks, and iron bars. Dumbbells were dropped on her body. She was hung from the ceiling and used as a punching bag. The boys poured lighter fluid on her skin and set her on fire for their amusement. They shoved bottles, scissors, skewers, and even fireworks into her body. Her eyelids were burned with lighters when she closed her eyes in fear. Her breasts were stabbed with sewing needles, and at one point a lit light bulb was forced inside her until it shattered. Her physical condition collapsed. After 10 days, her body was failing. She could no longer eat without vomiting. Her hands were smashed with weights until she could not grasp objects. Severe burns left her legs unrecognizable. At night, she was sometimes forced to sleep outside in near freezing temperatures. On one occasion, Junko managed to crawl downstairs and dialed the police. She had reached an officer on the other end when Hiroshi caught her. He snatched the phone away and told police it had been a mistake. No rescue came. Her punishment was brutal. She was set on fire again and beaten until she convulsed. She begged her captors to kill her just to end the suffering. They refused. By the 30th day, Junko could barely move. She was almost deaf, her body crippled, her appearance so altered that friends who had known her would not have recognized her. Still, the abuse continued. When she could no longer satisfy them, the boys even abducted another woman to assault. On January 1st, 1989, Junko welcomed a new year alone. She was in agony, unable to move, and completely broken. 3 days later, on January 4th, her captors forced her to play a game of Mahjong Solitaire. Even in her condition, she somehow won. The boys, furious at losing, beat her for 2 hours with an iron barbell. They poured lighter fluid over her arms, legs, face, and even her eyes, then set her on fire. After hours of torture, Junko went into shock. She died the next day, January 5th, after more than 6 weeks of unimaginable torment. Her body was stuffed into a 55-gallon oil drum, filled with concrete, and dumped at a construction site in Koto, Tokyo. For weeks, her killers might have escaped justice. But Hiroshi, while being questioned for another assault, accidentally confessed. He thought the police were already aware of Junko's case and admitted what had happened. Soon, all 4 boys were arrested. When police broke open the concrete barrel, the sight of Junko's remains horrified even veteran officers. She had to be identified through fingerprints, as her face was too disfigured. The trial revealed the full extent of the horror. Even hardened court officials fainted when listening to the details. The 4 perpetrators, Hiroshi Miyano, Joe Ogura, Nobuharu Minato, and Yasushi Watanabe, were convicted. But the sentences shocked the public. Despite the scale of the crime, they were not convicted of murder. Instead, they were charged with bodily injury, resulting in death. Hiroshi received 20 years. Watanabe is 9 years old. Ogura 8 years. Minato is as little as 5 to 7 years old. The light sentences enraged the public. Many believed their Yakuza ties influenced the courts. Even after serving their sentences, most of the boys went on to reoffend. Minato was later arrested for attempted murder after attacking a businessman. Ogura bragged about his role in Junko's murder, stole money meant for restitution, and served further prison time for kidnapping and assault. Hiroshi returned to gang activity and was arrested for fraud. Only Watanabe has remained largely out of sight. For Junko's family, the pain never ended. Her mother fainted when told the details of what had happened, and later required psychiatric care. Her father vowed that justice had not been done. Even today, decades later, the case is remembered as one of the most disturbing crimes ever committed. The story of Junko Furuta is not just a tale of cruelty. It is a reminder of how indifference, fear, and corruption can allow evil to thrive. Neighbors, parents, and police all had opportunities to intervene but chose not to. In the end, Junko suffered alone. More than 30 years later, the murder of Junko Furuta remains etched into history as a symbol of unimaginable human cruelty and systemic failure. It is a case that continues to haunt Japan and the world. And that brings us to the end of today's video. Our respect goes to the agents who continue pushing through, and our hearts go out to the families of the victims who still live with the aftermath of these tragedies. If you want more unsettling stories like this, Make sure you hit that subscribe button. We try to upload new disturbing videos almost every day, and trust me, you won't want to miss the next one. But if you don't want to wait, there will be more disturbing videos on screen for you to watch in about 3 seconds. I'll see you there. I'm